Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the President of the French Republic.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Great honor to be here with my friend. I'm delighted to welcome President Macron back to the White House. We've been together quite often, but not that often in the White House. We honored the President, First Lady of France, not so long ago. There was a beautiful evening, and we will not soon forget it. It was a beautiful day and evening, and many fond memories. I also want to thank Emmanuel for hosting me in Paris last December after a historic election win to witness the reopening of the spectacular Notre Dame Cathedral, where you did an outstanding job in bringing it back together. That was a sad day watching that burn. And 5 years later, you had it up, and it was, they say, more beautiful than it was before. So I think that's a great achievement. That was not easy. France is America's oldest ally. Our cherished partnership has been a force for freedom, prosperity, and peace from the very beginning. We're now working on some very interesting developments. One in particular, as you know, the war between Russia and Ukraine. In the American Revolution, French support helped us to seize our destiny as an independent nation. In the First and Second World Wars, our citizens shed blood together on the battlefields of Europe. And I'll never forget joining President Macron 6 years ago on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That was some day. The purpose of our meeting today is to end another battle, a really horrible one, a war, something that we haven't seen since the Second World War, that is ravaging European soil, the deadliest and most destructive conflict that one can imagine. I've seen the pictures, I've seen the satellite photos and lots of other photos, and it's a horrible thing that's happening. Thousands of people are dying a week. This very day is the third anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, which would never have happened if I was president. That was not going to happen. The horrors of this gruesome and bloody war can scarcely be overestimated. Hundreds of thousands of people, Russians and Ukrainians in particular, have needlessly died. An entire generation of Ukrainians and Russian men has been decimated. 1,000-year-old cities have been turned into rubble. Those beautiful spires that you used to see there, they were most beautiful in the world, they say, are lying in heaps of rubble, blasted to smithereens. It's time to end this bloodletting and restore peace, and I think we're going to do it. We've had some great conversations, including with Russia. Since my return to the White House, we've made more progress toward that goal in 1 month than occurred in the past 3 years. And I've spoken with both President Putin and President Zelensky. And again, a lot of good things toward peace are happening, moving it, I think, pretty quickly. Last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff conducted successful talks in Saudi Arabia with the delegation from Russia, and I'd like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the King and Mohammed, great people. They're really working hard to get this done. Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent peace. My meeting with President Macron today was another important step forward in that sphere, because he's been very much involved right from the beginning in trying to get it over with, and we're going to get it done. I believe that Emmanuel agrees with me on many of the most important issues. Chief among them is this is the right time. It may be the only time. You know, that's a very interesting and horrible situation, and that could evolve into a third world war. We're not going to let that happen. Should have never started, but it did. And what a mess, what a horrible, bloody mess. I'm also pleased that President Macron agrees that the cost and burden of securing the peace must be borne by the nations of Europe, not alone by the United States. And Europe must take that central role in assuring long-term security of Ukraine, which they want to do. And that's not a very big step. The big step is what's going to happen over the next few weeks. The United States has put up far more aid for Ukraine than any other nation. Hundreds of billions of dollars. We've spent more than 300 billion, and Europe has spent about 100 billion. That's a big difference. And at some point, we should equalize. But hopefully, we won't have to worry about that. We have other things happening that maybe take that out of the realm of necessity. And while we've given vast amounts of military aid and money in form of grants, much of Europe's contribution has been economic relief structured as loans for which they'll be repaid. Like the Europeans, I believe that taxpayers in the United States also deserve to recoup the colossal amounts of money that we've sent. The previous administration never even thought of that. They didn't think of a lot of things, like why did they let it start in the first place? That is why we must have an agreement with Ukraine on critical minerals and rare earths and various other things as security. And I think that that's happening. I think we've made a lot of progress. I had a report just given to me before walking in, and that we've made, Emmanuel, a great deal of progress toward getting that. I've been elected by the American people to restore common sense to Washington and indeed to the world. And I believe strongly that it's in the best interest of the United States, the best interest in Europe, the best interest of Ukraine, and indeed the best interest of Russia to stop the killing now and bring the world to peace. My administration is making a decisive break with the foreign policy failures of the past administration and, frankly, the past. I ran against a very foolish foreign policy establishment, and their recklessness has led to the death of many, many people. Under our administration, we're forging a new path that promotes peace around the world. And when I left office for the first administration, first term, we had no wars, we had no problems. We didn't have October 7th with Israel. We didn't have Russia and Ukraine going at it. We didn't have the problems in other parts of the Middle East. We didn't have inflation. It was a whole different world. And you know what else we didn't have? Millions of people pouring through our borders, many of them criminals released from other nations and put right into our land, murderers and drug dealers, gangs. We didn't have any of that. It's a different time, but now we have it and we're fixing it. We'll fix it all up. We'll get it done as quickly as possible. And we've made a great deal of progress. People are saying it was the best month for a president in our country's history. I hope that's right, but I feel it's right. We've done a lot of things in a very short period of time, 4 weeks. As I've said before, it's my hope that my greatest legacy, however, will be as a peacemaker and a unifier. I want to bring peace, not war. I thank President Macron for joining us today in this urgent work we're doing. We have some wonderful people up front right here that have worked so hard. Steve Witkoff, thank you very much. And Michael Waltz, thank you. Scott, thank you very much. And JD, thank you. They've really done a job. They worked very hard. It's a real passion to get this war ended. And I'd like to now invite Emmanuel to say a few words, and then we'll take questions. And again, Emmanuel, it's a great honor to have you with us at the White House. Thank you very much, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear Donald. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, je vais dire quelques mots en français.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be saying a few words in French.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président,
Thank
cher
you
Donald,
very
pour
much,
votre
Mr. President,
hospitalité
dear
et
Donald,
cette
for your
visite.
hospitality and for
Vous
this
l'avez rappelé,
visit. As
nous
you
avons eu
mentioned,
l'occasion ces dernières années,
we
lors
have had the opportunity to
de nos
meet
premiers mandats,
over
de
the past
pouvoir
few years. Since
échanger à
your
plusieurs
first
reprises
term,
à
we've been able
Paris,
to discuss
ici à
matters
la
in
Maison
Paris
Blanche
and
et à
also
travers le monde,
here
et ça a
at the
toujours
White
été
House. And it
un
has
bonheur, et je dois
always
dire que
been
j'ai en effet ici des souvenirs
a great
encore
joy to do that.
vibrants.
And I would like
Et je veux vous
to
remercier à nouveau,
commend
Monsieur
you
le Président, d'avoir fait l'amitié
and
à la
thank
France
you
de
Mr.
vous joindre à la
President, for
cérémonie de
extending
réouverture de Notre-Dame de
this
Paris que vous
friendship
venez
to
d'évoquer
France
à
and
l'instant.
taking part in the
Ça a été une
ceremony
très
at
grande
Notre
fierté
Dame
pour les
that you
Françaises et les
mentioned
Français
before. It was a great
de
honor
pouvoir
for
ouvrir
the
la
French
cathédrale au
people
reste du
to
monde et votre présence
reopen
a
the
signifié
cathedral to the rest of
cette
the
amitié,
world, and
cette
your
amitié qui vient de loin.
presence
Le président l'a
was a
rappelé,
testament
qui
to
est aux
that
origines,
friendship.
au fond, de
As the President said, this
l'indépendance américaine et de sa
friendship dates
construction
back
et
to the
qui, à
Revolutionary
chaque fois que
War since
l'histoire
the
a sonné,
beginning of the United States.
nous a ramenés
And
ensemble du bon
whenever
côté de celle-ci,
we've needed to,
c'est-à-dire
we've been
comme
able to come together and be on the
étant
right
unis
side.
pour
We've been
défendre la
able to
paix, la
be
souveraineté.
united to defend
Et je pense
peace and
évidemment
sovereignty,
aux deux guerres mondiales
namely in the
qui
two
ont scandé
world
le XXe
wars
siècle.
that marked the 20th
Au Lafayette,
century,
nous voilà de Pershing jusqu'aux vétérans
from
américains que nous
Lafayette to
célébrions il y a encore
Pershing
quelques mois sur
and
la plage
to
d'Omaha Beach. Et j'étais
the
très heureux de
many
revoir d'ailleurs
Americans who landed on
tout à
Omaha
l'heure, lorsque
Beach.
vous m'avez laissé
And
quelques minutes entre deux de nos rendez-vous,
we spoke
l'un d'entre eux qui est
earlier
venu me visiter.
before,
Je
and
veux
you
ici dire
mentioned
le
that
grand
one
respect que nous avons
of
pour
those
tous nos anciens combattants et les
gentlemen
vétérans
was
américains.
able to visit you
Cette
here,
histoire
one of
nous
the
oblige
veterans.
et c'est celle qui nous lie dans le contexte
This
du monde qui est le
is
nôtre. Et le président l'a rappelé,
part of history,
le
which
monde dans lequel nous
puts us
vivons ne
in the
manque pas de
world
défis.
that we are in
Alors
today. And as the President just said,
cette visite
there are many
nous avons décidé ces
challenges in
derniers
this
jours
world. And over the past few days,
avait évidemment un objectif premier qui est la
we
situation
have
géopolitique.
one main objective, which is
Et
the
je dois dire
geopolitical
que,
situation.
Monsieur le Président, je
Mr.
dois vous remercier
President,
tout
I
particulièrement d'avoir
really
accepté
wish to thank you
d'aménager votre agenda pour que nous
for
puissions nous voir
making
si
changes
vite.
to your schedule
Et
to
je
meet with
considère
us
que
so
nous avons
quickly.
véritablement eu des
I
avancées
think we've
substantielles.
made very
lors de nos échanges.
substantive
Et
steps
c'est pour moi une
forward
étape très
during our
importante
discussions,
de ce
and
que nous
this is
vivons.
a major step
Nous avons
in
ensemble
what we're
partagé
experiencing
une
today.
visioconférence avec
We had a
l'ensemble des
video
dirigeants du
conference with
G7
all
qui
of
nous
the
a permis,
G7 leaders, which
3 ans
was an
après le début de la
opportunity for
guerre
us to
d'agression,
discuss
la deuxième phase de la
this
guerre
matter
d'agression russe
3
en
days
Ukraine,
after the
de dire
Russian
évidemment
war in
notre soutien au
Ukraine,
président
and to
Zelensky,
express our support
au peuple
for
ukrainien, mais
President
aussi
Zelensky, to
partager
the
notre
Ukrainian
volonté
people, but also to
d'avoir une paix
speak and
durable.
share
Je crois que
about
c'est ce que
our
vous avez ces
desire
dernières années,
for a
ces
lasting
dernières semaines,
peace.
pardon, rappelé avec
This is what
beaucoup
we
de
have
force.
spoken about
Depuis le 22
very
février 2022,
forcibly
on
over
nous
the
annonçait une
past few
opération
weeks.
spéciale qui allait durer quelques
We
semaines.
thought that
Chacun admire la bravoure du peuple
this
ukrainien.
war was
qui a
only going to
résisté.
last a few weeks
Et
when it
vous avez
broke out in
raison de le dire, Monsieur le
2022.
Président,
We
nous avons
admire
aidé.
greatly
Et je
the
crois que nous avons eu
courage
raison
of the
d'aider, c'est
Ukrainian
notre
people.
responsabilité.
And Mr. President, I
ici
wish to
dire que
thank you
l'Europe
for this.
n'a pas ménagé
You
ni
mentioned
minoré ses responsabilités. Nous
that
avons
there
en
are
effet
responsibilities on
investi
Europe's
138
side, and
milliards
indeed,
de dollars dans l'aide
we have invested
à l'Ukraine et
128
aux Ukrainiens.
billion in
Et je dis bien
aid to
investi,
Ukraine and the
parce qu'au fond, l'Ukraine
Ukrainians.
a tenu ce front avancé de notre sécurité
Ukraine has
collective.
been able to hold the
Elle s'est
front
battue
of our
durant ces
collective
années, elle continue
security.
de se
It's
battre pour
fought
son indépendance et
over
sa
these past few
souveraineté,
years
mais
for
aussi
its
pour
independence
notre
and for
sécurité
its sovereignty,
collective,
but
parce
also
que
for our
je crois que
collective
personne dans cette
security,
salle n'a
because I
envie de
think that
vivre
no one
dans un
in this
monde où la loi
room
du
wants
plus
to
fort peut
live in
s'imposer
a world
et où les
where
frontières
it's the
internationalement
law
reconnues
of
peuvent
the
être du jour au lendemain
strongest
violées
and international
par qui que
borders
ce
can be
soit.
violated from one day to the next
Alors,
by
je considère
anyone.
que ces dernières heures, et vous l'avez
Over the
d'ailleurs
past
dit
few
tout à l'heure,
hours, and
plusieurs
as
choses se
you
sont
mentioned this,
cristallisées
Mr.
et nous avons
President,
pu avancer
we've
sur
been
plusieurs
able to
points.
see a
D'abord,
few
je veux
things
saluer votre
take
décision
shape.
de voir
First of all, allow me to commend you
le
on
président
your
Zelensky
decision
et de
to
finaliser en effet cet accord qui est
work
important
with
pour les
President
États-Unis
Zelensky
d'Amérique
and to
et pour
conclude this
l'Ukraine
agreement that's
sur
so important
les
for the
minerais
US
critiques et les
and
terres
Ukraine
rares.
on
Mais
rare
d'avoir cet
earths,
échange de
critical
substances
minerals, but
avec le
also
président
having
Zelensky dans cette phase est
substantive
très important et de pouvoir finaliser cet
conversations with
accord
President
qui aussi
Zelensky during this
acte
key
votre engagement
phase
pour une Ukraine
of
souveraine
achieving this
est
deal,
à mes
which
yeux un point
is a
très
major
important et
commitment
souhaitable.
to
Ensuite,
Ukraine's sovereignty, and I think that's
votre
very
volonté de
commendable.
bâtir la paix,
We
nous
also
la
have
partageons.
a
Je
shared
veux dire ici
desire
que,
to
en
build peace.
responsabilité, plus de 10 ans après le début de la guerre et
We will have
l'agression en
this
Crimée, et
responsibility.
3 ans jour pour jour
This is
après
10 years after the
l'agression
war
russe
started
dans
in
le Donbass,
Crimea,
je le
and
rappelle
then
aussi dans le nord du
we
pays à
saw the
l'époque,
events in Donbass,
la
in the
paix est une
Donbass
nécessité
region,
pour sauver des
and
vies,
along the northern
pour
part of
aussi
the
faire
country.
revenir des
We
prisonniers
want to
chez eux,
save lives.
faire
We
revenir
want
des
to
familles et
bring
des enfants, car je
prisoners
n'oublie pas ce
back
drame
and
humanitaire
bring back
qui
families and
touche
children, because
aussi
there
le
is
peuple
also
ukrainien.
humanitarian tragedy
Et nous en
affecting
avons
the
longuement
Ukrainian
discuté
people.
avec
We had
le
lengthy
président et
discussions
notre
with
souhait qu'il
the
puisse y
president,
avoir
and we
en
spoke
effet
about our desire
des conflits qui s'arrêtent,
to bring an
une
end
trêve qui
to
soit pleinement
conflicts, to have a
mesurable,
truce
vérifiable
that is
et qui permette
measurable,
la négociation
verifiable,
d'une
and
paix
that
durable
enables
dans laquelle il y
negotiation
aura
of
la
a
question de la
lasting
reconstruction de
peace,
l'Ukraine,
where we will
la
discuss
question de
not
ses
only
territoires
Ukraine's
et la question
reconstruction,
des garantie de
its
sécurité,
territories, but
c'est-à-dire
also the
du
security
maintien de la paix dans la durée.
guarantees meaning
car je
maintaining
le
peace
redisais au président,
over the
nous
long
avons
term.
déjà
As
connu
I
des
said
accords
to
de
the
paix qui
president,
n'étaient que des
we've
cessez-le-feu
experienced peace
sans prévoir ces
accords that
garanties de
were
sécurité.
only
Cela s'est appelé Minsk 1
ceasefires
puis Minsk 2
without
et nous savons
ensuring
d'expérience
security
que cela ne tient
guarantees,
pas.
Minsk 1
Et
and
je sais
2.
la volonté du
And we want to
président
make sure this doesn't happen
d'être
again. And I know
un
that
acteur durable
the
justement de
president
la paix dans
has
la région,
expressed
de
the
vouloir
desire to
cesser
be a
dans la
player
durée
for
cette paix.
peace
Et je crois pouvoir dire,
in
après
the
avoir
region.
consulté une trentaine de
I've
dirigeants
spoken
européens
with
et alliés
some
ces derniers
30
jours,
European
pour
leaders and
bâtir cette
allies
unité
in
et pour venir
recent
vous
days.
voir,
We want
que
to
tous partagent
bring
la même
together
vision des
these
choses. Nous
allies
voulons la
rather,
paix.
and share the
Cette paix ne
same
peut pas signifier
vision.
la capitulation de l'Ukraine.
This peace must
Cette
not
paix ne
mean a
peut pas être un
surrender
cessez-le-feu sans
of
garantie.
Ukraine. It must not
Cette
mean a
paix doit
ceasefire
prévoir
without
les
guarantees.
conditions
This
d'une
peace
souveraineté
must allow
ukrainienne, permettre à
for
l'Ukraine de
Ukrainian
négocier avec les
sovereignty and
parties
allow
prenantes
Ukraine
toutes les
to
questions
negotiate
qui
with
la touchent
other
et
stakeholders
pour laquelle elle est
regarding the
seule
issues
légitime à
it
négocier.
affects.
Et c'est une paix dans
That affects
laquelle
it
nous
rather,
devons
but it is
prendre
also
nos
a country
responsabilités
in which we
pour
need
maintenir
to
dans la durée
shoulder our
sécurité et
responsibilities so
stabilité
that
pour
we
l'Ukraine
ensure
et pour toute la
security and
région. Et
stability
pour
for
nous, Européens,
Ukraine
c'est
and
une
for the
question
entire region.
existentielle.
And for us Europeans,
Nous
this
avons
is an
longuement discuté
existential
cela avec
issue.
le
We also
président.
spoke about
J'ai pu
these
lui dire
issues
tout ce que nous
at
avions travaillé avec
with
le
the
président
president.
Zelensky. On est rentré
We've
dans le
worked with
détail
President
justement
Zelensky
des
and gotten to
différentes
some
étapes
of the
d'une telle
details of the
négociation.
various
Et nous avons pu
phases
aussi
of the
évoquer tout le travail
negotiation.
qui a été fait
And we've
avec nos
also been able
partenaires
to speak
britanniques
about some of this
pour
work with our
concevoir justement
British
ce que pourraient
partners
être
to
des déploiements de forces de paix
talk about
sur le sol
deployments
ukrainien
of peace
qui constitueraient une
forces
part de
on
ces garanties de
Ukrainian soil,
sécurité à
which are
laquelle
part of
d'autres
these
pays d'ailleurs sont prêts à se
security
joindre
guarantees. Other
et pour
countries are
laquelle
ready to join
évidemment
in this
la
effort.
solidarité, le soutien américain sont
Solidarity
indispensables et je
and
vous
support
remercie,
from the
Monsieur
US
le
will be
Président, d'avoir
crucial to this,
commencé le
and I
travail avec
thank you,
nous sur ce
Mr.
point.
President, for
Et
beginning
je crois pouvoir
to
dire
work
que
with us
l'accord que
on
vous
this
signez,
issue.
vous
And
apprêtez à signer avec
the
l'Ukraine
agreement that
et
you
la
are
discussion très
preparing to
claire que nous
sign
avons
with
eue à cet égard,
Ukraine
pour
and with
moi,
all
sont
the
des garanties
discussions
solides
we've had
que nous
are
nous sommes
very
compris
solid
et que notre
guarantees
volonté est la
that
même.
we are
La paix le plus
understood
vite
and that
possible,
we have the same wish,
une paix
peace as
solide
soon as
et durable
possible,
pour tout le monde
lasting,
et la
solid
reprise en quelque
peace
sorte
for
d'une
everyone,
vie internationale qui permette
and
d'offrir à tous
the
des
renewal
responsabilités.
of
Donc,
an
dans ce cadre,
international situation
des
where we
Européens qui
are all
prendront leurs
able to
responsabilités
shoulder
aux
our
côtés de leur allié
responsibilities,
américain qui prendra les siennes.
Europeans shouldering their
À cet
responsibilities
égard,
alongside their
je
American
suis
allies
venu
who will
aussi
shoulder
ici
their
porter un
own
message,
responsibilities.
président, de
I
très grande
also
clarté
wanted
de
to be
l'engagement
very
européen.
clear, Mr. President, about
Nous sommes engagés
Europe's
pour
commitment.
bâtir une paix
We
durable.
have committed to
Nous sommes
building
engagés
a
comme
lasting
Européens
peace.
pour
As
être partie
Europeans,
prenante
we
justement de
have
ces garanties de
committed to being
sécurité. Et
stakeholders
plus largement, nous sommes engagés,
in these security
conscients que
guarantees.
nous sommes,
And
que
we are
les Européens
also
doivent
well
encore faire
aware
davantage
that Europeans need to do
pour
more
la sécurité de l'Europe, sa
for
défense,
security in
et en
Europe,
quelque
for
sorte un partage
defense
plus juste
in
du fardeau
Europe, and to
sécuritaire
more
que
fairly
votre
share the
pays porte depuis
security
plusieurs années.
burden
Et au
that
fond,
your
pas
country's been
simplement, Monsieur le
carrying for so
Président,
many
vous savez
years.
l'amitié que je vous porte parce que vous le
Mr.
demandez, vous le
President, you
demandiez
know
déjà avec
how
force à votre premier mandat,
much
mais
friendship
parce que je
I
crois que tout
show
le monde
towards you
maintenant
and
en
I have
Europe
towards
est
you since
lucide sur
your
le fait que
first
c'est notre
term.
devoir pour
Europe is
nous-mêmes,
very
en
clear-eyed
tant
about
qu'Européens,
this. We know
compte
what we
tenu
need
du
to
risque
do
qui nous entoure et
as
de la
Europeans,
responsabilité qui est la
given
nôtre.
the threats
Et donc, le
surrounding
président
us and
Costa, ce
the
matin, a rappelé
responsibilities that we
cet
must
agenda de
shoulder.
Versailles de mars 2022
We
qui a déjà
spoke
conduit les
about
Européens
the
à
Versailles
augmenter de
agenda,
manière
which
historique
allowed the
leurs
Europeans
investissements.
to take a
Les
historic
Européens sont prêts
step
à faire
and
davantage
increase their
pour cette
investments.
sécurité, beaucoup plus
Europeans are
et
ready
beaucoup
to
plus
do
fort.
even more and
Et
to go
plusieurs
even
m'ont
farther.
redit cela avant de venir vous voir.
And
Monsieur le
several leaders said that to
Président,
me
cher
before I
Donald,
came
vous
here to
l'avez
meet you.
compris, cette paix par la
Mr.
force à laquelle vous croyez,
President,
c'est
dear
celle à
Donald,
laquelle nous
you
sommes
spoke
engagés
about this
par notre
peace
conviction
through
et parce
strength.
que,
We
en ce
fully
jour, je
share
pense au
that
peuple ukrainien, à ses sacrifices.
because we
et
must
à ce que nous lui
recognize
devons.
the sacrifices
Nous
made
avons
by the Ukrainian
également, avec
people and
Monsieur le
what we
Président,
owe to them.
évoqué
The
les sujets
President and I
économiques
also spoke about
et au fond notre
economic
volonté de
matters
voir
and
plus de
our
prospérité aux
desire to
États-Unis et
see
en
more
Europe.
prosperity in the
Nous avons eu
United
des
States
discussions,
and in
elles
Europe.
seront poursuivies par
We
nos
had
ministres, nos
discussions
équipes,
which will be
pour
carried on
clarifier
by
les
our
sujets qui
teams,
doivent l'être.
our ministers and
Mais au fond,
secretaries
notre
to
volonté, c'est qu'il y ait une
flesh out
concurrence
some of those ideas.
juste
But the idea is to have
et
fair
au fond,
competition
pas de biais dans la concurrence
and no
de
bias
nos industries pour pouvoir
within
échanger.
competition between our
Mais je vais ici dire
industries.
combien les économies américaines et européennes
Now,
sont liées.
the
Ce sont les économies les
American
plus
and
imbriquées au monde.
European economies
Ce sont
are
1500 milliards
extremely
de dollars
intertwined.
d'échanges de
Some
produits, de
1.5
services
billion
physiques et digitaux
in
chaque
trade
année.
trillion
Et je
rather,
sais votre attachement à rétablir la balance des
in
paiements.
goods and
Oserais-je dire qu'en
services. And I
tant
know
que
you've
président de
spoken
France,
about wanting
j'ai la
to
même, puisque
look at the balance of
nous avons
payments.
aussi un déficit
We
commercial.
also have a trade
J'essaie aussi de
deficit.
faire valoir qu'il fallait
And
regarder pas simplement
I
les
know
biens et
that
produits,
we
mais
need to look not
les
only
produits numériques
at
pour lesquels vous êtes un très grand
goods, but
exportateur.
also
Et au
digital
fond, la solution,
items
c'est
and
de nous
goods,
réengager
which you
sincèrement vers
export. And we want to make a sincere
une concurrence
commitment
justement qui soit équitable
towards
et la volonté
fair
d'avoir des échanges plus
competition,
fluides et encore
where we
davantage
have
d'investissements. Vous
smooth
êtes un très grand
trade
investisseur
and
en
more
France. Nous
investments.
sommes le
You already
5e investisseur,
invest
nous,
a
France,
great
pas
deal
simplement
in
l'Europe,
France,
dans votre pays.
and
Et
France
je
is the
souhaite qu'on fasse
fifth
davantage de
the
part et
fifth
d'autre.
largest
Et je
investor
veux
in the
saluer d'ailleurs
United
tous les
States.
investisseurs
And I would like
américains
to
qui ont fait partie des
recognize
grandes
here
annonces
all
pour
of the
l'intelligence
American
artificielle.
investors
Il y a quelques
who
jours à Paris, où
announced
120 milliards de dollars
investments,
d'investissement ont été annoncés en intelligence
some
artificielle pour notre pays.
$120 billion
Au-delà
that
du
were
lien
announced at the
transatlantique, c'est notre
AI
volonté
summit.
d'avoir en effet plus de prospérité. Je suis
This
convaincu qu'il
is
y a
our
au
wish. We
fond
want to have
un
more
agenda positif
prosperity
derrière
on
tout ça.
both sides of the
Enfin,
Atlantic. We
nous
have a
avons
shared
ensemble évoqué
agenda in
plusieurs
that
sujets
regard.
sur le
We
Proche et
also
Moyen-Orient.
spoke about the
Et je
Middle
crois pouvoir
East,
dire que nous
among other
partageons la même
subjects.
volonté de ne
And
jamais
here
voir
again, we
l'Iran
have the same
obtenir
desire. We don't
l'arme
want to see
nucléaire,
Iran
notre
obtain
volonté de revenir
nuclear
à,
weapons. We don't
au fond,
want,
une approche avec les partenaires de la région en qui nous avons
or rather,
confiance,
we
qui
want
permettent
an approach with
eh bien,
partners in the
justement
region
de
that we can
cantonner
trust.
les activités nucléaires iraniennes, de
Given
pouvoir limiter ses
Iran's
capacités
nuclear
balistiques
activities, we want to
et de
limit
réduire
its
ses
ballistic
déstabilisations régionales.
capabilities and avoid any
Et
type
sur la
of
Syrie et
regional
l'Irak, nous partageons la même
destabilization.
volonté aussi
With
de ne
respect to
pas
Syria and
voir les
Iraq,
groupes
we also
terroristes islamistes
share the same desire. We
reprendre
don't
de la
want to see
force, retrouver de
Islamic
l'activité,
terrorist groups
parce que depuis des
resume
années,
any
nos
of their
armées sont avec
activities
courage
because for some
engagées
time our
dans ces
armies
pays,
have
dans
very
l'opération Inherent
bravely been
Resolve, dont vous
engaged
avez
in
le
the
commandement
Gulf,
et à laquelle nous contribuons,
as you
qui
have
est une mission
led,
forte et importante qui a
and
contribué à la stabilité de
contributions
la région.
have been
Et
significant
je le dis
and
avec
helped
ici beaucoup
stability in the region.
de sincérité, de
And I
force et
say this with
d'engagement,
great
puisque la France a été
sincerity.
touchée par un attentat terroriste en 2015
France
qui avait
was
été
affected
préparé
by a
en Syrie par ces
terrorist
mêmes groupes.
attack in
Et donc, nous ne
2015,
céderons
which
rien
was linked to the
dans cette
terrorist
région
activity in
à vos
Syria.
côtés
And
pour
we
plus de
are in that
sécurité.
region
Voilà,
at
mesdames et
your
messieurs,
side
en tout cas,
to
nos échanges
work for more
ont été
security.
extrêmement fructueux,
Ladies and
à la
gentlemen,
fois
we
ce
had
matin à l'issue de
extremely
notre
productive
visioconférence
discussions
et à l'instant avec
this
le
morning
vice-président,
during
les
the
ministres
conference,
et nos conseillers.
and we spoke with our ministers
Et
and
je veux dire
counselors and
combien,
advisors. And I wish to say,
après ces échanges avec le président Trump, je suis
after
convaincu qu'il
speaking
y a un
with
chemin.
President Trump, I am
Nous avons partagé nos
fully
convictions, nos
believe that there is a
exigences.
path forward. We
Nous savons
share
tout le travail qui
the
reste à
same
faire. Et donc, dans les
beliefs. We
prochaines
know
semaines, nous avancerons
what work
ensemble
needs to be
et nous
done,
aurons
and in the weeks
l'occasion,
to
nos
come,
équipes puis
we
nous,
will
de nous
work on
revoir
that.
dans
Our
des formats
teams will
différents
come together
pour
in
faire de
various
cette paix
formats to
solide,
make
durable,
sure that we have this
je l'espère avec beaucoup de
solid,
force,
lasting
une
peace with
réalité de court
great
terme. En tout
strength.
cas, Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de vous remercier
Mr.
pour
President,
votre accueil,
thank you
remercier
so
pour
much
la
for welcoming
qualité de
me
nos
here
échanges
today. Thank you so
et
much
pour votre
for
engagement.
these productive
Merci, cher
discussions and
Donald.
for your commitment. Thank you, dear Donald.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Emily. Okay, thank you very much. Brian, would you like to ask a question? Go ahead.
Welcome, President Trump. I just want to touch upon real quickly the Harvard poll that came out that had, thank you very much. The Harvard poll that came out had you up 9+ points, and all of your agenda that you ran on, you're accomplishing that. You got the support of the American people, including stopping the war in Ukraine. If you can comment on the latest Harvard poll, I appreciate that.
Well, I was honored by it. It was a big poll, and it's usually a poll that leans on the other side of things, the other side of the world, so to speak. But the Harvard poll is a respected poll, and it has us not only leading, but leading by a lot and leading on every single issue that we've talked about. And as I said, we've become the party of common sense. And I think that's a very important element now, common sense, because what's happening in the world and even in this country, some of the things that took place, many of them are now canceled and the rest are being canceled as we speak. But we've moved very rapidly and I think very effectively. So I was honored by that poll. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Go ahead, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, you said before that you would like to see Russia.
Yes, go ahead.
When you're meeting in Saudi Arabia with President Putin, will that happen regardless of any progress on the Ukrainian file?
Yeah, I think the meeting in Saudi Arabia was a fantastic one. We met with the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic young guy. He's young, but with great imagination and a tremendously respected all over the world. And he goes right to the king, and the king is incredible. Gotten to be friends with both of them very much, and they want to see this ended, and they're going all out to make sure that it is ended. I think Russia, likewise, I've spoken to President Putin, and my people are dealing with him constantly, and his people in particular. And they want to do something. I mean, that's what I do. I do deals. My whole life is deals. That's all I know is deals. And I know when somebody wants to make it and when somebody doesn't. I will say this: before I came here, there was no communication with Russia whatsoever, and Russia wasn't answering calls. They were not talking to anybody. They wouldn't talk to anybody, and people sort of accepted that as being that they want to go forward and just keep going without stop. But when I got here, one of the first calls I made was to President Putin, and we were treated with great respect. And they want to end this war. So that's a big thing because I didn't know if I could say that, but it's a big thing. They want to do it, and the group in the front row that I introduced, they're all very active in it, and we're working on deals right now, transactions right now, and in particular, the big one is to get the war stopped, whether it's ceasefire or direct to an agreement. I'd like to go directly to an agreement, but ceasefire will always happen a little bit quicker. And every day you're saving thousands or at least hundreds, but thousands in some cases lives. So we want to see if we can get that done very quickly. Uh, yes, for the president, please.
Thank you. Correspondent based in Paris. Question for both of you, actually. Mr. Macron, you were one of the last Western leaders to speak to Putin before Ukraine's invasion. What advice, what recommendation could you make to President Trump to make sure that this time you can get strong enough guarantees, from Putin to get a peace deal that lasts this time? And Mr. President Trump, what makes you think you can trust Putin in those negotiations? Thank you.
Look, I will never give any advice to President Trump. We have friendly and trustful discussion, but my experience with President Putin is the following. Number one, I always think it's good to have discussion with other leaders, and especially when you disagree. I stopped my discussion with President Putin after Bucha and the war crimes because I considered that, we had nothing to get from him in the time. Now this is a chance, there is a big change because there is a new US administration. So this is a new context. So there is good reason for President Trump to re-engage with President Putin. But my experience is the following, and I shared it with President Trump and the team. In 2014, our predecessors negotiated peace with President Putin. But because of the lack of guarantees, and especially security guarantees, President Putin violated this peace. And I had several discussions, especially beginning of 2022, several times, 7 hours with President Putin, 15 days before launching of the attack. He denied everything, but we didn't have security guarantees. So this is why being strong and having deterrence capacities is the only way to be sure it will be respected. And I insisted on that, and this is why I believe that the US has the capacity to do so. And this is why I think we should never say, I will never send any boots on the ground because you give a blank check to violate any type of commitment. So I think it's good to have discussion. I think it's useful to have negotiation. I think it's super important to go to the peace. But my strong point was to say, let's try to get something first, which can be assessed, checked and verified. And let's be sure that we build sufficient guarantees on the short run. And this is where we are ready to be engaged. As for France, a lot of my European colleagues are ready to be engaged. But we do need this American backup because this is part of the credibility of the security guarantees. And this is our collective deterrence capacity. And I have the feeling that the president has this capacity.
I think it's benefit of Russia to make a deal. And I feel that we'll do that. It is what it is. Again, it's a war that should have never been started. It's a war that would not have been started if I were president, but it did start, and it's at a terrible level where cities are burned down and shot down to the ground. It looks like demolition sites, a whole big pile of demolition sites, and we got to get it stopped. Too many people, too much agony. The whole culture is destroyed when you rip down some of those ancient, really ancient or near ancient buildings. It's so sad to see, but I think it's very much to the benefit of this tremendous distrust on both sides. That's why it's good that I'm coming in now, but I think it's to the very much benefit of Russia to make a deal and to go on with leading Russia in a very positive way. That's what you have to do. But I really believe that he wants to make a deal. Maybe wrong, but I believe he wants to make a deal. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Next week, there's a key deadline for your Canada and Mexico tariffs. Do you expect those will go back
Fully
on,
do-
or
do
do you
what-
believe those countries have done enough on the border to stop those from taking effect? And for President Macron, I'm wondering if you believe that this critical minerals deal with Ukraine represents a de facto security guarantee by the United States, since the U.S. would have an interest in protecting those reserves in Ukraine. Thank you.
We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico. We've been taken advantage of. We were led by, in some cases, fools, because anybody that would sign documents like they signed, where they were able to take advantage of the American people, like has happened over the last long period of time, except for a little 4-year period that took place 4 years ago. But anybody that would agree to allow this to happen to our country should be ashamed of themselves. No, the tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. I mean, you know, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States on manufacturing, on just about everything, every aspect that you could imagine they took advantage of. I look at some of these agreements, I'd read them at night and I'd say, who would ever sign a thing like this? So the tariffs will go forward, yes, and we're going to make up a lot of territory. All we want is reciprocal. We want reciprocity. We want to have the same. So if somebody charges us, we charge them. It's very simple, but it'll be very good for our country. Our country will be extremely liquid and rich again. Plus, we're doing other things, as you know. We're finding tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse at levels that nobody thought possible. You're seeing what's going on. And that was also part of the Harvard poll. Do you agree with what President Trump is doing with Elon and others that are looking for the waste, fraud, and abuse? And the numbers were staggering. It was like 70% to 2%. Everybody wants to find out. They don't like it. And, you know, the radical left or whoever it may be starts screaming about the Constitution, but it has nothing to do with the Constitution. It has to do with fairness to this country. It has to do with being ripped off. And when you read the things that all of these billions, and I mean many billions, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on, that's all you have to do is stand up here and read them. I could stand up all day and read the kind of things where we're spending all of this money. The good news is that when you think of how rich a nation we can be when we get rid of this, you know, sometimes you'll buy a company and you'll see it was really well run. They accounted for every penny. Well, not much you can do there. You got yourself a bad deal. This one is the exact opposite. Tremendous fraud, tremendous waste. And when you think of what it is, you know, Elon uses an expression, caring. If we had people that cared, just cared a little bit when they did contracts, when they negotiated with outside vendors on behalf of the United States. That's what I'm doing now. I'm negotiating for the people of the United States. So we're doing a great job of it. I will say we found it'll be hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and fraud and abuse. Thank you, please.
Look, I think this discussion is a very important one. First, because it's important for the US, and it will be a good occasion for a first very important meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. Second, I think there is a lot of economic upside on both sides. And third, de facto, there is a recognition of Ukrainian sovereignty, a recognition of the Ukrainian interests. And this is de facto a very important alignment of interests. Now, the security guarantees will be negotiated in due time in a full-fledged package of a peace security. But this peace, as it is now written and negotiated, and as this meeting is scheduled, is an important step forward, full-fledged peace agreement.
Monsieur le Président Trump, Monsieur le Président Macron.
President
Monsieur
Trump, President
First of all,
Macron.
you say, I would like to make a deal with Putin. So when you do a deal, it's a win-win deal. What are you giving to him and what is he going to give you, to America? And I was impressed by the way you referred to Notre Dame and that you were impressed by the reconstruction of Notre Dame. A lot of Americans have sent money to Paris to participate to the reconstruction of Notre Dame. As a president of the United States, are you going to contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine? Et Monsieur le Président Macron,
President
quelle est pour vous
Macron,
la principale avancée de
what
votre
for you
entretien avec
is
Donald
the
Trump?
main
Et pouvez-vous
area
nous
of
confirmer
progress in
qu'il y
your
a
meeting with
effectivement
President
un
Trump?
accord
Can
pour
you
envoyer
confirm
des
that
troupes
there is an
européennes
agreement
de
to send
maintien de la paix?
European
Est-ce que la France
peacekeeping
va le faire?
troops? Will France
Combien d'hommes?
participate in
Pour
that?
faire
How
quoi?
many troops?
Est-ce que
What
c'est
would
pas
they
un
be
grand
doing?
danger d'envoyer des
Would
troupes
this
françaises,
represent a
européennes en
great
Ukraine?
danger to
Merci.
send French and European troops to Ukraine?
Well, I guess it's a little strange question because you ask whether or not we're going to, on behalf of the United States, contribute to Ukraine. I mean, we're in there for about $350 billion. I think that's a pretty big contribution. I do appreciate the first part of your question, however, because I think they've done an incredible job with the Cathedral of Notre Dame. I think the president has done. I know he headed it up, and I know how hard he worked, and it took a period of time, but really not a long period of time, considering what that was, so delicate, so beautiful. And I was there, and I saw the work, and I'm very good at construction. I know good construction. I know bad construction. They did a beautiful job, and this man has to be given a lot of credit for that. It's an incredible cathedral. Most people thought it couldn't be saved, and if it was, it would have to be built in a different form, and we didn't want to see a different form. We wanted to see the same form that you built. So I just want to congratulate you. That was an amazing job. I don't think you've gotten enough credit for it. Someday you will. Someday you will.
Thank you, Donald. Merci beaucoup. Pour revenir à votre
Thank you
question,
very
je
much.
considère que
To
la
go back to
discussion
your
d'aujourd'hui a
question,
été marquée par
today's
plusieurs avancées.
discussion showed
D'abord,
several
la
areas of
confirmation, c'était une
progress.
des choses importantes pour
First,
nous. Ça fait partie de tout le travail qu'on a
we
mené aussi avec le
have been working a
président
great
Zelensky
deal
pour essayer de bâtir
with
une proposition
President
d'action
Zelensky
qui soit
to
acceptable pour
have
l'Ukraine.
a proposal
Le fait
that's
que le
acceptable to
président
Ukraine.
Trump a confirmé qu'il
President
allait
Trump has
rencontrer rapidement le
confirmed
président
that he will be
Zelensky
meeting with
pour
President
finaliser
Zelensky very
l'accord
soon to
sur
finalize
les
the
minerais critiques et les
agreement
terres rares,
on
et pour avoir
critical
une discussion
minerals and
d'ensemble
rare
dans ce
earths
contexte. Ça, je
and
pense que c'est
to
un point
speak
très
together
important.
about that matter. That's a
La
very
deuxième
important
chose, nous
step
avons,
forward. The
dans le
second
cadre de la
thing
discussion,
is that
nous
during
sommes
our
rentrés dans le
discussions,
détail
we were able to
la
go into some of
proposition
the
d'action que
details
nous
about
venions
the
faire
proposal that we
de
have just
comment
made
la paix ou une trêve, des éléments
to
concrets,
have
mesurables
a
pouvaient être
truce,
organisés
a peace,
et comment
and
ensuite
be
on
able
pouvait
to
structurer
measure
la
that
discussion.
and then
Et donc,
structure our
la France,
discussions on
plusieurs
that
autres
basis.
pays européens,
France and
l'Ukraine
several
sont
other
évidemment
European
maintenant
countries,
au travail
along
pour
with
pouvoir
Ukraine, are hard
bâtir ce
at
qui est
work
cette paix durable
to build
avec
this
des éléments
lasting
très
peace
concrets dans
with
lesquels il y
very
aura
specific
justement les
points,
garanties de sécurité, les
including
questions territoriales
security
qui appartiennent totalement à
guarantees,
l'Ukraine,
the
la question de la
territories that
reconstruction, la
belong to
question
Ukraine,
du potentiel
the issue of
économique et des minerais rares.
reconstruction,
Donc là-dessus,
the
on
economy,
discutait en détail
and
de ces
critical
propositions
minerals.
d'action.
We've been able to go
Et
into
troisième
the
avancée qui est pour
details
moi
of those proposals. The
vraiment un
third
des acquis
area
de
of
notre
progress,
discussion
which
d'aujourd'hui
uh,
et qui marque un tournant, c'est
really
la
mark a
précision avec
turning
laquelle nous
point
avons parlé des garanties
is
de
the fact that
sécurité.
we were able to talk about the
Et je
details of
pense
the
que le président a
security
eu lui-même tout à l'heure
guarantees.
et encore
And
aujourd'hui, à l'instant, des mots
the
très clairs.
president has
Il veut la
shown
paix.
this over the past
Nous
few
voulons
days,
la
and he
paix, on est
said so a
totalement
moment ago.
d'accord.
We want peace.
Nous
He
voulons un
wants
deal
peace.
rapide,
We want peace,
mais pas
peace
un accord
swiftly, but
qui
we don't
soit
want an
fragile.
agreement that is
Et
weak.
le fait qu'il y ait des Européens qui
The
soient
fact
prêts à
that there are
s'engager pour
Europeans
apporter
that
leur
are ready
réponse à
to
ces garanties de
engage
sécurité,
to
et qu'il y ait une
provide for
clarté
these
maintenant du
security
message américain
guarantees.
sur
And
le
now
fait
there's
que
a
les
clear
États-Unis d'Amérique
American
comme alliés
message that
est prêt à
the
apporter
US,
justement
as an
un soutien,
ally,
une
is
solidarité
ready to
à cette
provide
approche
that
est pour
solidarity
moi un
for
tournant.
that approach. That's
Et
a
c'était
turning point in my
un des
view.
acquis de
And
ce
that is one
déplacement
of
et
the
de nos discussions.
great areas of progress
Pour
that
ce
we've
qui
made
est
during
des
this
troupes,
trip and
je vais
during
ici
this
clarifier les
discussion.
choses. On a pu par le
When it
passé,
comes to troops, in the
en
past,
particulier il y a un an,
a
à
year
des
ago
fins qui étaient à mes
specifically,
yeux pleinement légitimes,
we
évoquer la possibilité d'envoi
saw
de troupes
a
dans un
reason
contexte de
to
guerre.
talk about
C'était pour
sending
recréer de
troops
l'incertitude stratégique.
to
Là, quand on parle de
for
troupes, on en
strategic
parle le lendemain de la
regions.
négociation
Today, when
d'une
we talk
discussion de
about
paix
troops,
durable.
we're talking about sending
Et
them
donc, une
in
fois qu'il
after
y
we've
a une
negotiated a
paix
lasting
solide,
peace.
durable,
And once we
négociée,
have that
signée par
solid,
l'Ukraine
lasting
et la
peace
Russie,
that's part of an agreement signed by
dont nous
Ukraine,
serons
signed
collectivement les
by
garants.
Russia, and for which we will provide the
La France
guarantees.
a
And at
travaillé avec
that
le
point,
Royaume-Uni ces dernières semaines
and
pour
recently
dire nous, on est
France
prêt à
worked
contribuer.
with
Donc, on a
the
eu un plan qui a été
UK
discuté
to
entre nos
provide
entités
its
militaires pour dire
contributions.
nous, on est
We've
prêts.
worked on plans, we've worked
Pas
with our
d'aller sur le front,
militaries,
pas aller
not to
sur
go
dans
to
des
the front
territoires
lines,
contestés ou occupés,
not to go
mais
into
à marquer
occupied
notre
territories,
soutien
but
pour nous assurer que
as
la
a
paix telle
show
que
of
négociée et signée par
support
les deux
to
parties
show that we have a
est bien
negotiated
préservée.
peace signed by both sides,
Et donc,
and that is a
ce sont
peace
des
we will
déploiements, si je
preserve.
puis dire, totalement
So
pacifiques,
these
non
would
engagés
be
dans des combats,
peaceful
mais qui sont,
deployments of
si je puis
troops,
dire, des
not
déploiements de
for
force de
combat.
garantie.
These would be
Elles seront,
deployments of
par
an
définition,
assurance
limitées, mais elles marquent une
force. They would be
solidarité.
limited, but they
J'ai
show
échangé, je vous l'ai dit,
solidarity.
avec tous nos alliés. Il y a
I've also
plusieurs pays,
spoken with all
européens et
of
non
our
européens, qui
allies,
sont
and
prêts
there
à
are
participer à
European
cet
and
effort.
non-European allies who are ready and
Les
willing to
uns
take
ont
part in that
continué à aider
effort.
l'armée ukrainienne à maintenir ses
Countries have
capacités,
helped
à être
Ukraine
dans la durée
maintain
en termes
its
de nombre
military
de soldats ou en termes
capabilities
d'équipement.
in terms of the number of
Les
soldiers
autres
it has, equipment,
par la logistique
whereas
ou les
others
capacités sur
have
le terrain,
provided
d'autres aussi à
logistical
venir à nos
support
côtés.
on the
Alors,
ground.
question à tous, c'était est-ce que c'est d'accord
The
avec
question
les États-Unis
is
d'Amérique? Le
whether
président a eu des mots très forts
or
tout
in
à
what
l'heure pour dire oui,
form
et pour
the
même d'ailleurs
US will
nous apprendre que dans les
contribute.
discussions
And
qui étaient en
during
cours
our
avec la Russie,
discussions,
c'était acceptable dans les
and during
échanges
the
qu'il y a eu avec
discussions
la
with
Russie.
Russia, we've
Et
understood
donc
that
ça,
this
c'est
would be
une avancée
acceptable
très
to
forte, et donc
Russia,
ça
and
veut
that's a
dire que
very
les
important
Européens
area of
prennent dans ce
progress.
contexte
And that means
leur
that in
part
this
du fardeau,
context,
puisque
the Europeans will
on
shoulder
s'engage, on
their
avance,
part of the
qu'on
burden,
garde ce qui est la
their
force de notre
share of
alliance
the
à
burden.
travers les
We
décennies,
have
qui
a
est
strong
notre
alliance that we've built
solidarité
over
et du
the
coup la
decades. We
capacité de
have our
dissuasion
solidarity,
que
and
nous
we
avons
have
ensemble.
deterrence
Et donc non, ça n'est
capacities.
pas dangereux, parce qu'en fait, qu'est-ce que ça signifie?
What does it mean? Would it be dangerous
Qu'il y a un accord qui va être signé par l'Ukraine et la
if
Russie,
there is an
qui a été
agreement
déclenché
signed
par
by
le président
Ukraine
Trump,
and
dont nous
Russia,
sommes
thanks to the
les garants,
efforts of
et qu'en
President
quelque
Trump?
sorte, si la
And if
Russie
we
venait à le violer,
provide the
elle
guarantees and
rentrerait de
Russia
facto
violates the
en
agreement,
conflit
then
avec tous ceux qui
it
se
would
sont engagés
be
dans un processus de
in
paix.
conflict with everyone who is
Et ça,
engaged
c'est
in
un
the peace
changement.
process.
Ça n'a
And
jamais
that
existé
is
ces dernières
a
années. C'est
change.
pas ce qu'on avait
That
fait
was
en
something we
2014.
did not see in the past.
Et
That's
donc,
not what
c'est
we
ça
saw
la
in
vraie rupture.
2014.
C'est
So
d'avoir quelque
that
chose de
is the
solide avec
real
la capacité de
change that we're
dissuasion
marking. We have this
américaine,
deterrence capacity
la
on the
capacité
American
d'engagement
side.
des
We have
Européens, et quelque chose qu'on
the
va justement
capacity
organiser
for
ensemble.
engagement on the
Voilà,
European
donc c'est
side,
pas
and that's
dangereux,
something
mais
we're going
c'est
to continue
crédible.
working on together. It's not
Et ça nous
dangerous, but it's
semble
credible.
moins dangereux que des choses qui iraient beaucoup plus loin en
It's
termes
less
juridiques.
dangerous than things
Et
that
ça
could
nous semble ce
happen
que nous
in the
devons
long
faire pour
term.
garantir
And I
la
think this is
sécurité.
what we
Et
need to
je veux
do
le
to
dire ici très
ensure
clairement,
security.
c'est
And I
la
say this
sécurité
very
aussi
clearly.
des Européens
We're
dont il
also
s'agit.
talking about
Et moi, c'est ce que je
security
dis depuis
for
des semaines.
Europeans. I've been
Si on
saying
ne
this for
garantit
weeks
pas la
now. If
sécurité de
we do
cette part du
not
territoire
guarantee the
de l'Europe,
security of this territory
comment
within Europe,
garantir
then
notre
how
propre
can we
sécurité
guarantee
à
our
tous?
own security for one
Nous,
and
nous
all?
vivons à 1500 km
We
de l'Ukraine, nous,
live
Français.
just
Et c'est encore
1,500
plus près quand on est
kilometers
évidemment
from
polonais ou allemand.
Ukraine.
Donc c'est notre
And
engagement pour la
the
sécurité
Germans and
collective.
Polish are
Et en
even
quelque sorte,
closer.
c'est répondre aussi
So
à
our
l'appel qui nous est
collective
fait. Vous
security
devez
is
prendre,
important.
vous devez,
We
vous, être
need to
Européens, être
answer
davantage
this
engagés.
call
Mais
for
nous, Américains,
Europeans
nous
to be
restons
more
en solidarité.
engaged, and
On le fait en Ukraine, mais on
Americans
doit le
will
faire
be
aussi pour
there
notre sécurité
still
collective.
in
Mais la
solidarity.
clarification qu'on
Europeans
a eu
are
aujourd'hui
working
pour moi
for
est un
their
tournant.
collective security, but I really think this was a turning point today in our discussions.
Emmanuel, thank you very much. Great job, and it's been wonderful being with you. Say hello to your beautiful wife, and we will see you again soon. We'll be speaking often. We'll get this thing worked out. We're going to get it done. So important, and great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, I'll take care of it. Very useful. Thank you. Yeah, no problem, man.